Good evening. Welcome to the November 20th meeting of the Larimer County Planning Commission. It's our tradition at the Planning Commission to start each meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. I'd ask that everybody please stand and join me. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I'm Patrick Rowe, the chair of the Planning Commission. Thank you for being with us tonight. Copies of the agenda can be found by the wall at the front door there. Please mute your cell phones. The members of this Planning Commission are all volunteers. I'm going to ask each member to introduce themselves to the Commission, starting with Commissioner Duffy.
Good evening. I'm Connor Duffy. I've been on the Planning Commission for a little over 2 years now, and I live in the Timnath area.
I'm Adam Eggleston. I've been on the Planning Commission since July, and I live in Southeast Fort Collins.
Good evening. My name is Jordana Barrick, and I live just north of Fort Collins, and I've been on the Planning Commission for about 4 years now.
Good evening. My name is Nick Cassidy. I live in Fort Collins, and I've been on the Planning Commission since July.
Hello, my name's Shelby King. I've been on the Planning Commission for about 1.5 years, and I live in LaPorte.
Good evening, I'm John Weiss. I've been on the commission for since July, and I live in Timnath.
Again, I'm Patrick Rowe, and I've been on the Commission for just over 3 years, and I live in Northwest Fort Collins. Jenny Axmaker is the Planning Manager. Ms. Axmaker, would you please introduce the staff in attendance and provide meeting protocol for this evening?
It would be my pleasure, Chairman Rowe. We're joined with the County Attorney staff, Christine Luckison. Next to her is Sam Lasher, a County Planner. Next to her is Danielle Rymanis, also a County Planner. I'm Jenny Axmaker, the Planning Manager, and then I'm joined with our admin support for this hearing, Melissa Brewski. Across the way, we have Tracy Shambo from our Engineering Department. We have Justin Curry, another County Planner. We have David Pringle from our Engineering Department. We have Amy White, our Code Compliance Supervisor, and then we have our SIPR Director, Leslie Ellis. We respectfully request that all members of the public silence their electronic devices, and as the chairman mentioned, there are copies of the agenda available next to the door, or if you're joining us online, you can find the agenda at larimer.org/BOCC/commissioners-meetings. The hearing procedures for tonight are as follows. For each discussion item, we will begin with a presentation from county staff, followed by a presentation from the applicant, with time for any clarifying questions from the commissioners. There will be an opportunity for any members of the public to address the commission with their comments on the matter. Both the applicant and county staff will have an opportunity to respond to any questions or concerns raised during the public testimony. The commission will then ask any remaining questions of the applicant or staff before entering into deliberations and working towards a decision on the matter. During public comment, please wait to speak until you are recognized by the chair. Please maintain civility, refraining from audience applause, comments, or disruptions, either positive or negative. Please make all comments to the commissioners from the podium. A portable microphone is available if you need it. Please state your name at the beginning of your comments and provide the spelling of your name if it's unique. Please speak directly into the microphone so that remote participants joining on Zoom may hear. For our hybrid meeting attendees, you will be muted until you are recognized by the chair. If an online attendee wishes to speak or to remove an item from consent, please use the raise your hand function on the Zoom control bar or *9 on your phone. Upon request, we do have assisted listening devices available for the hearing impaired. Tonight, we have 2 items on the consent agenda and 2 items on the discussion agenda. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Axmaker. I have some brief comments about the role of the Planning Commission for the audience. The Planning Commission acts as an advisory board to the Larimer County Commissioners. We review and make recommendations on land use issues outside of town and city boundaries. Some land use decisions will also be heard by the Board of County Commissioners. We come to these meetings and hearings unbiased and listen to staff's report, public testimony, and information provided by the applicant. Planning Commission is the final decision-making body for location and extent reviews, as well as amendments to and approvals of the Larimer County Master Plan, sub-area plans, and amendments. The Planning Department staff provides us with a comprehensive package of information about land use applications and plan amendments. We gain insights from the information and viewpoints that you all provide, so we appreciate your attendance and participation. Your input is welcome and greatly appreciated. So next we will turn to public comment on the county land use code regarding relevant land use matters not on the agenda or future proposals. So this is the public's opportunity to provide public comments on anything that's not on our agenda this evening or planned for a future agenda. A few points about public comment. During this public input period, we can't consider information on matters that are scheduled or likely to be scheduled for a hearing. So if your comments relate to one of those items, we'll just ask you that you share your input at that appropriate hearing. While public comment is about items not on our agenda, the item should pertain to land use. Lastly, public comment made on these items will not be addressed this evening, but will be forwarded to staff for review and a potential response at a later time. So with that, is there any person in attendance here or online who wishes to speak to an item in the county land use code that is not on the agenda this evening? And do we have any attendees online?
There are no hands raised online.
Okay, great. Thank you. So with that, we will move on to our next agenda item, which is approval of the minutes from our October 16th meeting. Are there any amendments to the minutes? And if not, I'd entertain a motion for the minutes.
I move that we approve the meeting minutes.
Second.
Great. Motion and second. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Weiss,
Yes.
Barrick,
Yes.
King,
Yes.
Eggleston,
Yes.
Duffy,
Yes.
Cassidy,
Yes.
Chair Rowe.
Yes. The minutes are approved. Next order of business is our consent calendar. Do I need to say anything about the tabled item?
You do not, other
Okay.
than we are going to consider it as part of the consent agenda.
Okay. So the consent calendar,
I'm sorry. Yes, we do need to make a motion to table the lighting code update to next meeting in December. My
Okay.
apologies.
great. So yeah, I'll entertain that motion.
Enter a motion to table the technical update of Article 4.10 exterior lighting of the Land Use Code, file number 24, code 0281,
To the December 18th.
to the December 18th meeting.
Second.
A roll call on that, please.
Commissioner Cassidy,
Yes.
King,
Yes.
Duffy,
Yes.
Weiss,
Yes.
Barrick,
Yes.
Eggleston,
Yes.
Chair Rowe.
Yes. And that item is tabled until December 18th. So next up is our consent calendar, consent agenda. The consent agenda is comprised of items that are meant to be non-controversial and routine and will not be discussed unless requested by a commissioner or member of the audience. The consent agenda, all items on the consent agenda will be voted on as a whole. This allows us to focus on and spend more time with discussion items. This evening we have two items on our consent agenda. The first is the Fisher subdivision, file number 23 land 4377. The second item is Fort Collins Loveland Water District location and extent, file number 24 zone 3711. And does any planning commissioner wish to pull any item on the consent agenda for a full hearing this evening? Does anyone in attendance wish to pull an item on the consent agenda for a full hearing? None in person, any online?
There are no hands raised online.
Okay. So seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Move to approve the consent agenda from, do I need to say the date?
No, yeah, you could probably just repeat the item numbers, I guess. Consent agenda and consent items comprising of Fisher subdivision. Do you want me to read it?
Yes, because I don't have that
No, that's okay,
paper
sure.
in front of me. I'm sorry.
Chairman Rowe, you want me to read
Sure.
that for you?
Go ahead.
So I move that we approve the consent item, including Fisher subdivision file number 23, land 4377, and Fort Collins Loveland Water District location and extent file number 24, zone 3711.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Roll call, Ms. Crutchins.
Commissioner Duffy,
Yes.
Eggleston,
Yes.
Barrick,
Yes.
Cassidy,
Yes.
King,
Yes.
Weiss,
Yes.
Chair Rowe.
Yes. And with that, our consent agenda passes. Next up is discussion items. We have 2 discussion items this evening. The first is Manufacturing Housing Park Preservation, MHP-P zoning district, which is file number 24, code 0279. Do we have a staff presentation this evening?
Yes, yes, we do.
Great, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner members, and thank you for members of the audience online. We are here today to present for a potential recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners for adoption, the Larimer County Manufactured Housing Park Preservation Zoning District. All right, so we're going to kind of do a high-level overview just to catch up to people up to speed on why we're doing this project, where it kind of came from, and then we can get into some specifics, but we'll try and breeze through this. So the purpose of this project, this Manufactured Housing Park Preservation Zoning District, that's the MHPP, it's that we intend to create a new zoning district to maintain affordability as well as preserve natural alternative housing opportunities in strong communities. To put it simply, there already is a manufactured housing park zoning district. This one would be in addition to that, and the main difference is the word preservation. So the goals, it would be to create a new tool. This would be one tool, ideally, in order to preserve these existing manufactured housing parks. We encourage manufactured housing as the primary use in the zoning district, and ultimately, it's to reduce the likelihood of park closure due to redevelopment, and it would protect residents from being displaced. So where this kind of project started from is our comprehensive plan, Larimer County's master plan. It identified in Chapter 3 that there needs to be potentially more housing needs and housing diversity. And so especially to know on the 1.3, at the very top of that screen, you could see that it developed initiatives that preserve current attainable housing stocks. And then further down in H2 in housing diversity, you could see to work with municipalities and others to address tools for and needs of mobile home park residents. So this really came out of a planning process that started in 2019, the comprehensive plan that outlined that there's intention from Larimer County to preserve alternative housing and affordable housing. With that, intent statements are used in zones to kind of clarify what they are, what the intent of that zone is, to not leave any ambiguity. And so this one, it reads, I'm just going to read it word for word. The MHPP district is designed to protect parcels with existing manufactured housing parks in order to preserve natural alternative housing opportunities. This district is intended to support existing manufactured housing communities as their primary residential use and allow for other complementary uses which would primarily serve residents of manufactured housing communities. And what we kind of want to kick off this meeting with is that as of right now, there are 2 phases to this project. We are in phase 1. We've been in phase 1 for about a year now. And if this were to go through, we would move to phase 2, but you can see that that's not until next year. So what we did in this phase 1 was to do an inventory of all the manufactured housing parks within Larimer County. We did look at the parks that are within Larimer County's unincorporated jurisdiction, as well as those within municipal kind of boundaries that are within Larimer County. There was community outreach done. We sent postcards to owners. We reached out to housing advocacy groups, we had an email, a website, and just tried to hear from the community on specifics to this zone. We went to an October work session with the Planning Commission and Board of County Commissioners. And then I'm going to mention specifically that during this phase 1, no properties, no parcels, no mobile home parks will be directly affected or rezoned with this phase. This phase, the purpose of tonight is to create the new zoning district that would live in the land use code. Any rezoning, anything like that would come at a later date when there's more conversation and evaluation. And then finally, to this phase 1, we have not done an evaluation of building or zoning compliance issues because there are thousands of manufactured housing homes. And with that, it's not necessarily worth a staff time just yet to do a full inventory, and who knows how long it could take. So just please note that that will come if this moves forward. And then finally, to mention on phase 2, 2025 and beyond, would be the implementation of this zone. So today is just creation of the zone. The second one would be to potentially rezone these properties and to complete potentially an evaluation.
Great. Thank you, Danielle. Good evening, everybody. My name is Sam Lasher, and I'm a planner 2 with the county. So as Danielle mentioned, one thing that we did as part of this phase 1 is to conduct an inventory of existing manufactured housing parks in the county. And there are 33 existing parks within unincorporated Larimer County. They are located in various areas, including Fort Collins, Loveland, Wellington. And as you can see on the screen, they're also located in a variety of different zoning districts. Ranging from our rural residential zoning districts, even to our commercial and industrial light zoning districts. The parks are also a variety of sizes, everywhere from maybe just a dozen units to parks that have hundreds of units. So there's a very diverse group of parks within the county. And I think it is also important to note that out of the zoning districts listed on screen, there's only one zoning district that actually allows for manufactured housing parks as a permitted principal use, and that's our existing MHP zoning district. The other zoning districts do not allow for parks as a principal use, so many of them are actually currently non-conforming. So another thing that we did as part of phase 1 is created a list of land use code changes that would associate with this new adoption of the zoning district. So I'm just going to touch on a couple of the main ones. So the biggest one is with this new zoning district, it's really going to have a limited number of allowed principal, accessory, and temporary uses. Really, the intent of this is to limit commercial uses and limit any sort of redevelopment potential. And it's really focused on preserving the existing communities and also allowing for certain uses that support the residents within these communities. So these are just a few examples of the proposed allowed uses within the zoning districts, both principal, accessory, and temporary. The full list of proposed uses can be found in Attachment A of your packet. Another change that staff is proposing is we would match the lot and building standards that are currently applied to the existing MHP zoning district to the new zoning district. So lot and building standards include property line setback requirements, maximum height standards, and minimum lot area as well. And then lastly, there are a few things that staff is not proposing to change, but instead wanting to carry forward to this new zoning district. So the first one is in our land use code in Article 3, we have use-specific standards that are applied to manufactured housing parks. So if a new park were to come into the county, or if an existing park were to expand, we would evaluate these use-specific standards for that development. Some of those standards include parking standards, lighting, landscaping, setbacks between units. So staff is not proposing to change these standards, but rather they would be applied if any of these existing parks were to expand or change use in any way. Lastly, we also have current definitions for manufactured housing park and manufactured home in our land use code. We're also not proposing to change these definitions, and they would carry forward. And again, the full list of proposed changes to the land use code are in attachment A. So ultimately, what are the benefits of adopting this new zoning district? So really the primary benefit, with limiting the types of allowed uses in this new zoning district, both principal, accessory, and temporary, that helps to limit any sort of redevelopment potential. And so that really helps to preserve this one type of natural, alternative, and attainable housing that exists in the community. And with that, it helps to maintain stability for residents, many of whom who have lived in these communities for years or even decades. And as Danielle mentioned, with the adoption of this new zoning district, it helps to directly address some of the goals within our comprehensive plan, again, specifically related to manufactured housing communities, and as related to housing needs and housing diversity. And this is just one tool to help support affordable housing in general. There could be other tools or other ways of going about it through different processes. As I mentioned before, about 2/3 of the existing parks are actually non-conforming with regards to use, and that's because they're located in a zoning district that actually does not allow for a manufactured housing park. So rezoning these existing parks into the new proposed zoning district would bring those into compliance with regards to use specifically. And then lastly, this just helps increase public awareness and support for these communities and also for the residents in these communities. So once again, we just wanted to remind you of the attachments in the packet, and we are happy to answer any specific questions about the information that we've provided. And ultimately, planning staff does recommend approval of the adoption of this new zoning district, and we do have a suggested motion on the slide for the Planning Commission to consider. With that, we're happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lasher. Appreciate that. Do any of the commissioners have questions of staff at this time? Couple? Yeah, Commissioner Weiss.
Thank you. I'll try to keep it short. So we keep talking about how you're trying to address parks that are non-compliant. And I understand the concept that maybe they're established in areas that were not zoned for the parks 10 years ago or whatever else. But I'd like to know, is that the only issue from a non-compliance, or are there other non-compliance issues that still exist that have to be, that are not really addressed by just changing the zoning? Because it seems like you're trying to, we'll take everything that's not in compliance, we'll move it to this new zoning, and everything is good. And I don't think that's what you're saying, so I'd like some feedback on that.
Well, I can kind of start with saying, thank you for the question, first of all, that this is just one tool of the potential toolbox. This is just one trick of the trade that others regionally have used. And so it doesn't get all the compliance issues resolved. Absolutely not. There's building code violations potentially. There's standards for use-specific standards violations. And those could possibly continue existing by switching over the park. So I'm not going to deny that it would bring everything into compliance. However, I just want to mention that this is just one possible tool to preserve the affordable housing. Sam, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think Danielle covered it, but I would like to clarify that there are a few different ways that you can be out of compliance. As I sort of mentioned before, you can be out of compliance in terms of use or in terms of building or zoning code violations. So you are correct that with this new zoning district, and if these parks were to rezone to the new zoning district, they would become compliant in terms of use, but there could still be existing violations or certain standards that the parks do not meet. And so ultimately, if the parks were going to expand or change in use in any way, we would then apply or evaluate our current standards for that new change or expansion. But you're correct that just simply rezoning the parks would not bring them fully into compliance.
Okay. Can I get a sense, really briefly, what are maybe the top 5 out of compliance issues with these parks?
Good evening, Amy White, Code Compliance Supervisor. You know, mobile home communities are under our jurisdiction, and as Sam and Danielle were trying to explain, we look at them from a zoning position and also from a building position, right? So we do know that there are some building code violations, and those get reported either generally by our building inspectors that are out in the parks doing inspections on different units. In the last couple of years, we've tried to do an outreach to a lot of the mobile home communities to help them address some life safety issues, right? So they may have an addition that blocks an egress window, which we try to address. But as far as zoning violations, we just don't see any of the zoning violations. So I guess, Commissioner Weiss, to answer, it's mostly carports, additions, sheds that have been built too close. So those are the types of violations that we see mostly out in the field.
Okay, thank you. Just bear with me if you don't mind. Thanks. So if I'm a developer and I come in, assuming this, we now have 2 zonings, if you will, for parks, and I come in a couple of years from now and I say, I want to build a new park, do I get to choose which zoning I can use, or am I going to be told you have to use this and not this one?
So that is a great question, something that staff has sort of recently discussed. I think at this point, we would have to evaluate the park and the property on a case-by-case basis. At this point, they could have an option or a choice of which one to rezone into, especially if it was a new park coming into the county. But that's something that we absolutely want to discuss further in future phases.
Okay, and then doesn't the creation of this second zone maybe act as a deterrent to further development of the parks? Because if I understand staff's report, the existing parks in theory would kind of like stay the same, but if you were to add on to the park, the addition would have to meet maybe a different standard. And I would see that as maybe being, why would I want to add on to my park if I have to spend more money to have an extra level of requirements?
So that's also a good question. So staff has also discussed this a little bit as well. So as I said before, staff is not proposing to change any of the existing Article 3 use-specific standards, but you are correct that we don't necessarily want to prohibit or create a burden from these existing parks expanding. And so again, if an existing park wanted to expand, we would want to evaluate those Article 3 use standards on a case by case and determine which ones are appropriate to apply. You know, is there a life safety issue that we want to make sure, you know, those existing or those new units are safe to live in and aren't too close to other units. But we wouldn't necessarily choose to apply all of them. I will say that I actually recently worked on an expansion of an existing park in the county. It's the Sunflower Community off of Mulberry and I-25. They actually recently came in to add 2 additional units to their park. And because it was an expansion, we required, you know, an evaluation of those Article 3 standards. And we ended up determining that not all of them needed to be applied. And so we did go through on a case-by-case basis and determine which ones were appropriate. So I think the same type of evaluation could be applied to these existing parks as well. Because we do want to, you know, if a park has the physical space and the capacity to add additional units, I think staff does want to be supportive of that, but also ensure that we're balancing life safety concerns and other things like that. So I do think there would be a detailed evaluation as part of that.
Okay, thank you.
And Sam, real quick, if I may, I think it would add to this is if an individual or an owner decided to expand their current MHP in the MHP zone, it would similarly need to apply to those standards as well. So this isn't much different than if you were to expand an already existing park within an MHP zone. I don't want to get too held up on the compliance piece because ultimately the purpose of this is to prevent displacement of the residents. I'm happy to keep talking absolutely about the compliance, but I do kind of want to reiterate that the purpose of this zoning district is to prevent displacement of these residents.
Okay, I understand that. Thank you. But I'd like my last question. Can I get a very brief idea of what legislative rezoning would how that would take place, or what would happen?
Sure. So I'll let Jenny jump in case I misspeak on anything. This would actually be the first legislative rezoning that Danielle and I are a part of. So I think there's a few ways to go about a legislative rezoning. You know, all of the properties could be legislative rezoned at once, kind of as a group, or they could be legislative rezoned on an individual basis. And something that Danielle and I have discussed is maybe, you know, rather than doing a blanket legislative rezoning, we do further evaluation of each park, determine maybe which ones are appropriate to legislative rezone. There would likely be additional community outreach before getting to that point. Maybe a further evaluation of the park itself and maybe sort of which standards they're out of compliance on. And then ultimately for the noticing standards, there are legal noticing requirements per the land use code. And I believe that the legislative rezoning would go before Planning Commission and the Board of County Commissioners. Did I miss anything important there?
Nope, I think you're good. Just that legislative rezoning is different than voluntary rezoning, and it would be at the direction of the county.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, thanks. Any others with questions of staff? Yeah, Commissioner Eggleston.
Thanks so much for the presentation. Question, how many mobile park homes or parks that we've lost due to rezoning or without this preservation zoning?
Just to ensure I understand your question, do you mean how many are no longer mobile home parks?
Yes.
That's a great question. I don't know that, but that's something we can look into.
Okay. And then, without getting too much in the weeds about displacement, is there any mechanisms in this that can guarantee that residents won't be displaced because of new zoning and having more emphasis or more of a spotlight on the parks now with the new zoning going to phase 2? So is there any mechanisms or guarantee that individuals won't be displaced or have to take down their sheds or carports? Negative consequences. Yes, they may have a home to stay in, but they lose the culture or what they've built around that home. And is there any guarantee or mechanisms within the historic preservation zoning that can guarantee affordable housing because it doesn't do anything to change what a landlord can charge on the land rent.
Yeah, I'll first kind of address that second piece that unfortunately there's not much we can do when it comes to rent and when it comes to what people pay. That's definitely between the discretion of the owner and maybe their tenants. So simply no to that second piece. To that former piece, I'd like to maybe talk about that a little bit more. Simply no, I'll just say that. There is no guarantee that they will never be displaced. This was kind of, as I keep mentioning, just a tool in the toolbox to at least try and prevent it. And maybe things will come out in the future, but based on what other regions are doing, this is kind of the option. And I mean, honestly, due to Larimer County's support of affordable housing and increasing the potential amount, or I should say preserving the amount of affordable housing, this is, at the moment, what we think is best.
And if I can just add on to that a little bit, it is a tool in the toolbox, and it's also a relatively affordable tool and is easily to implement tool. So there are other options, but they are quite costly. And so this is one option that we can do rather quickly and easily to help prevent displacement. And I'll actually circle back to your first question, Commissioner Eagleston. I don't know for the county, but just previously from my experience in the city of Fort Collins, they had at least 2 mobile home parks redeveloped in the last 10 to 15 years.
Thank you.
Great. Yeah, any other commissioners? Oh yeah, go ahead.
No, I don't have
Oh,
a
no
question.
questions. Okay. I have a question. What happens with a proposed development or redevelopment of a park in this new zoning district that we're talking about in a growth management area? Does that still get zoned PUD, and kind of we defer to the local community in terms of the character of that community and what they want to do, or will there be some exceptions for this zoning district?
That's also a great question. So generally, if there's a property within a growth management area and it's adjacent to an incorporated property, a rezoning would trigger annexation. In the case of a legislative rezoning, it would not trigger annexation, and so it could just be rezoned to MHPP. However, I do think that for the parks that are located within the GMAs, conversations with the applicable jurisdiction would be something that staff would like to get their input on. So it would probably be a discussion, between county and city staff.
And just for example, as previously mentioned, I believe the city of Fort Collins does have a preservation program adopted. So, for example, any parks within their GMA, we would expect that they would want to use their preservation as an option as well. And us having something similar in our toolbox would be helpful in that situation.
Thanks, Jenny. Yeah, and I will note that we did meet with City of Fort Collins staff in developing this zoning district, and we did model our proposed zoning district off of theirs because they did a lot of great work in the past few years.
Great, thanks. Yeah, so at least compatibility with City of Fort Collins, and as far as other communities, there'd be a conversation, and maybe the county is exerting a little bit more of, well, this is kind of our intent and purpose, but also deference to that other community, and I guess see where that conversation goes.
Absolutely. We would like to hear from them.
Okay. Thanks.
Patrick, really quickly, back on the compliance issues, whether it be on a individual unit within one of the parks or on the parks as a whole with a compliance issue, correct me if I'm wrong, but those issues, if the individual or park owner wants to elevate that, they would take that to the Board of Appeals. If they wanted to keep their shed or their chicken coop or whatnot, is that the course of reaction if they wanted to do that?
That's an option, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And ideally, we wouldn't remove the shed, and if the shed was removed, it was either because it didn't meet setbacks possibly, or it was a violation to the building code and not necessarily the zoning code.
Great. Yeah, any other commissioner questions for staff at this time? And if not, we will open the public hearing and take public comment. Is there anyone in the room that would like to give testimony? And not seeing anybody in the room, or is there anybody online?
If there are any members of the public online that would like to speak, please use the raise hand function or press star 9 on your phone at this time. There are no hands raised online.
Okay, great. So yeah, no comments, so we'll go ahead and close the hearing. If there are no other questions of staff at this time, we'll kind of move into commissioner discussions and deliberations on the item. Go ahead, Commissioner King.
Well, thank you for the presentation, and thanks for taking this up. Manufactured housing, there are 22 million manufactured houses in the United States. They make up approximately 7% of our total housing stock and are the largest supply of unsubsidized affordable housing that we have as a nation. They are very important to the folks that need a place to live. The average manufactured home owner's median income is $38,500, whereas a single family homeowner's average income is about $80,000, and that's nationwide, not just here. But it's very, very important. They have been closing. I do not know the rate in Larimer County, but they've been closing at quite a clip nationwide. And there are very few protections for the tenants that live there. There are very few incentives for the mom and pop owners that have traditionally owned them to keep them open. And as the housing crisis has worsened, a lot of investment companies, large investment companies, Blackstone, Carlyle Group have been paying hundreds of millions of dollars for manufactured housing communities. And while this doesn't stop that from happening, it does show those potential owners that manufactured housing is important to the folks in the places where they live. And so I think it's really important that we pass this and that we do what little we can. Colorado has more protections for manufactured home residents than a lot of places. We have a tenant opportunity to purchase law that has been really helpful. Owners can only raise rents in manufactured housing communities once a year, although there's no cap on how much they can raise the rents. So it still harms tenants. There aren't a lot of things we can do, but I think we should do what we can. This does not harm owners in any way. They aren't losing any money off of it. And I think that it's really important that we show support for the ways that we can preserve affordable housing, no matter whether the individual units are in compliance with codes or have chicken coops where they shouldn't have them or sheds where they shouldn't have them. So I will be voting in support of this.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner King. Other commissioners? Commissioner Eggleston?
So, as much as I appreciate the need for keeping the mobile home parks, I don't feel that I feel that this complicates the zone. Whenever we know that the more complicated zones take longer to have stuff approved, and then the longer stuff it takes approved, the more it costs to build and approve, and just hurts the overall affordability stock by the complexity of our zones. So I think it doesn't do enough to change our current zoning or protections for the individual homeowners or renters. And so I feel there's more complexity added, but less guarantees and support and mechanisms that may belay the risk to the tenants or the owners, the individual owners within the parks. I feel there's still a lot more unknowns waiting on phase 2 that makes it uneasy moving forward. Spending a lot of time in these parks in different fashions, a lot of the individuals are always fearful that their owners of their units would just kick them out randomly. And if there's more issues because of compliance or because of whatever may be on individuals, I think that may put individuals at more. Overall, it may help to protect the affordability, but for the individuals, it's going to create a lot more uncertainty based on what their landlord and tenants or owners of the properties say. So I feel it doesn't go far enough, and there's not enough of an issue currently in Larimer County for me to go forward with this or to approve it.
Thank you for your comments. Any other commissioners? Yeah, Commissioner Weiss, please.
Thank you. Well, I agree with both my commissioners who've spoken before me. And I've struggled with this, but I have to say that I think we're just adding another level of bureaucracy. I don't see the real benefits of, I mean, I do, but I don't see the real benefits of a second zone. And then if you were to legislatively try to rezone all these, what is there to prevent a developer or owner of an existing park who doesn't maybe want to come under this new zoning requirement to just basically say, okay, I want to redevelop my park into something else? I just think it's more complicated than it really needs to be. So I'm a no vote on this one.
And I just was going to reply to the last part of your statement. I think, because for me, that's kind of the whole intent, is that this makes it more difficult for a property to redevelop. Of course, they could come and they could petition for rezoning, but there's a much higher standard and for that to occur versus if they're in one of these other zoning districts where they have other eligible uses as part of that zoning district. I think they're afforded many more opportunities to redevelop that. So I think I guess the point, as I understand it, is that when we create this new zoning district and then legislatively rezone these parks into that zoning district, they'll have fewer options. The only other use options will be those that are complementary to that primary use as a mobile home park. I'll be supporting this one. I do think it's an important housing option in our community. I'm certainly feel like it does tie to our master plan and the housing needs and housing diversity. I will also say I'm a little bit more skeptical of the affordable claims. I think that, I'm more on the side of, it seems like private equity has gotten involved in this area because they can make a lot of money and they can raise the rates, and the lending that occurs in these parks often seems predatory as well. So I'm not as convinced that these things are a great option from an affordability standpoint, but I do know that, it is a population that often doesn't have other alternatives, unfortunately, and so, preserving what's there, I think, is important, but I hope that there's other efforts that work with these populations to help them, move out of a community like that where they can create more equity. I think it's generally well understood that people's home purchases are a big part of kind of building financial stability and equity. And I think that these communities don't afford those same opportunities, in my opinion. So I guess I am supportive of this because I think it's important, but I just want to kind of temper my enthusiasm because I think that there are some real challenges with these as well. So. Commissioner Barrett?
Sure, I'll just jump in. And first, I'm grateful for staff for the diligence that you've done on this. I know it's a touchy subject, and I appreciate the commissioner's comments. And Commissioner King, thank you for those stats. I did not realize how significant that was as a housing option across the country. And Commissioner Rowe, actually, I have seen some manufactured housing parks. I don't know if they exist here in Larimer County or not, but there are some in Colorado where people actually own the home and they lease the land within the park. And so there are some equity models out there. I think since the point is preservation, I'm for this. And I think that there's still some things to work out, and I'm on the fence as to whether the full legislative rezone for all the parks is just the best thing to do across the board, versus to take it one by one. And so I don't feel like I'm the best expert to decide how that's going to play out best. So I don't really have an opinion on that, but I am in support of this. Thank you.
Any others? And I will just say, can't help myself. In terms of the equity, I think that is the more common model where the homes are owned and then they pay lot rent. And I think the challenge is, and you can look at Sunflower as an example of this, those lot rents, they increase so much that they erode any sort of equity gain. So if you look at kind of the price increases or the value increase of the improvements that the people actually get to sell, it's just sitting there static is kind of the challenge. So, yeah, I certainly hope that it works really well, and I just think that there are a number of challenges with those communities as well, and yeah, I think it's a very important housing type. So again, I'm supportive of it generally. So,
And
Commissioner King.
if I can add to that right there, actually, most of manufactured housing residents do own the home that they live in, and they rent the land that it sits on. And that's one reason to really support this, because oftentimes when that happens, if I buy a home, if you look around at these homes that are existing, often they are pre-1976, which means they don't meet HUD standards. They aren't even allowed to be moved from the manufactured home park that they're in. And so if the park closes, that is that person's only asset. They own it outright, but not only are they legally not allowed to move it, but it costs thousands of dollars to move, even if it is built after 1976. And so a lot of times what happens is that these people who are they're like living on the lowest rung of the American dream. They have to just leave their house. They have nowhere to go. They have no recourse for being evicted. And then they're just entirely homeless. And they have their only asset is gone. And then, just to add insult to injury, the park owner, it's abandoned property. And so the owner gets to keep it and can rent it out without paying for it at all. So keeping the manufactured housing parks open and allowing the folks to stay there who are there, even if it is not housing that a lot of people want to live in, and even if it doesn't comply with codes, we are in such a housing crisis, and there is just no place for these folks to go. If you're paying, say you don't pay mortgage because you own your trailer, but you pay $500 a month in lot rent, or even $800 a month in lot rent. If you're on Social Security or some sort of a fixed income, where can you go with your family and pay $500 a month in rent anywhere, or $800 a month in rent? I mean, my friend who just rented an apartment is living in a one-bedroom apartment that's $1,800. And so I understand the complication with it, and that not all the bugs are worked out, but this is such a complicated, the land lease home ownership system is so complicated and so frankly predatory that we need to take whatever steps we can to preserve these folks' homes.
I have to respond.
Commissioner Weiss.
I'm not saying that we already have a zone which allows for parks. We already have parks. I don't disagree with what you're saying, but we have a zone which allows parks to exist. So we're adding a second zone, which I think complicates the issue. And like I said, yes, maybe the second zone, the new zone, would give more security. Maybe. That's a big if. Maybe it would give more security for those parks that fall into that. But if I'm an owner of a park who owns the land and is doing that, and I get wind that the county of Larimer County is going to legislatively rezone, or is even thinking about that, I may just bail then, because I don't want to go into something and make it even harder for me to maintain that park. So I'm not convinced that this adds as much security to existing parks or even any future parks, and I don't really think we'll see a whole lot more, but I just don't see it. I might be wrong. Maybe it'll happen 10 years from now, but I don't see anything short-term benefit to adding an extra layer of zoning on this.
Any other commissioners want to weigh in on this?
I guess I'll just
Commissioner Cassidy.
be brief. I think I'm looking at the report provided. It shows there's 44 Larimer County communities, which is about 5,000 lots. And so it sounds to me like this is a tool that isn't going to be the end-all be-all to make sure that everybody is covered with all of this. But at the same time, if they are rezoning, it's not like once they rezone, anybody is not going to be in compliance. It's more so a building code issue if they are going to have any issues in that situation. So from what I'm understanding of everything that's been presented tonight, I do think I'm in support of what this is, but I do understand the need that maybe this goes a little further in the future as well.
Ms. Lasher, could you put the suggested motion on our screens, please?
Absolutely. One sec.
Chairman Rowe, I'd like to enter a motion.
Yeah, please.
I move that the Planning Commission recommend approval of the adoption of the Manufactured Housing Park Preservation MHP-P Zone District File Number 24 Code 0279 to the Board of County Commissioners.
Second.
Motion and a second. Roll call, Ms. Scrutchins.
Commissioner King,
Yes.
Cassidy,
Yes.
Weiss,
No.
Duffy,
Yes.
Eggleston,
No.
Barrick,
Yes.
Chair Rowe.
Yes. So motion passes. Our second item this evening is the Larimer County Water Master Plan. It's file number 24 code 0280. And I believe we have a staff presentation.
That is correct. Okay, that was pretty smooth. That's what I like. All right. Hi, everyone, again. My name is Danielle Rymanis. I'm a planner here with Larimer County, and I was acting as the Water Master Plan Coordinator for over the last year. I'm joined in the audience with Leslie Ellis, who's the Director of Community Planning, Infrastructure, and Resources, who's really been the project sponsor. We're really excited to bring this to you tonight. And for those that are tuning in online, actually, it is the Planning Commission that will adopt this as it will become an element of Larimer County's master plan, its comprehensive plan. It would be approved following, if adopted, it would be approved following with the Board of County Commissioners, but I just want to clarify that it is the Planning Commission that is the adopting agency. So the purpose of the Water Master Plan, and by the way, I'm going to try and breeze through these slides as well. I've come to you guys 4 times now, so thank you for participating in previous work sessions, giving your input and your feedback, and we're really excited to show where we're at today. So the purpose of the Water Master Plan ultimately is to direct Larimer County in what to do around water. So it really outlines the county's role when it comes to supporting water conservation, protecting watershed health, collaborating with water providers, stakeholders, municipalities to address water supply challenges, to mitigate hazards, and to ensure long-term water security for the community, for Larimer County and the region. I have a lot of kind of public entities up there and some nonprofits, and just we're really grateful for those that have participated through stakeholder meetings, our partners moving forward, et cetera. And as I mentioned at the beginning, if adopted, the Water Master Plan will become an element of the comprehensive plan. And according to the state, some recent legislatures, that all comprehensive and master plans need to have a water supply element, so this would be that. Okay, next slide. So this is kind of a high-level overview of roadmap, or even a river, if you will, kind of down the mountains of where we've been. This project really kicked off in July, August, September of last year. To formate, kind of get the committees together, talk about what we wanted, to identify the challenges, to talk about the vision and goals. We kept moving forward, bringing in our stakeholders. We had 2 different advisory groups, a water advisory group and a technical advisory group. They gave input on data review. Oops, that's my alarm. Sorry about that. And so, so they kind of gave a lot of input on how the direction of this plan was moving forward. In May, I was able to join Commissioner Shattuck McNally, and we attended the Colorado Counties Incorporated, presented on that. So just a great regional and the state of Colorado, and got to tell about our work. Furthermore, we kind of kept moving. In September, we attended the Growing Water Smart workshop, which was really exciting to help further kind of bring together the land use and the water piece. And then we had it would be our preliminary draft. We had an open house there in October. So through it all, we had our advisory groups, and then we also had 3 kind of public events. We had a workshop, and then we had 2 open houses as well. And today we're presenting the adoption draft, which is really exciting. So the plan overview, there's 5 chapters. Chapter 1, it gets to the why. It aligns with the Climate Smart Future Ready plan, our comprehensive plan, our strategic plan. Chapter 2 is identifying challenges. What are we up against regarding water? Because water is a really broad, general topic and dynamic, to say the least. Chapter 3 moves into the vision and goals. What does Larimer County intend to do? Chapter 4, the focus areas. Where does Larimer County intend to maybe prioritize areas versus the other? And that was a mapping exercise. And then Chapter 5, the strategies. To me, it's kind of the meat of the water plan. What are we going to do about this? And so there's 10 strategies that we are proposing. I'm going to kind of quickly go over these strategies. All of this information is online, and I do have a QR code in the website at the end, but it's planning.gov Larimer.gov/planning/water. So our 10 strategies that we're proposing here is to integrate the water plan strategies and actions into related county plans, support fuel reduction outcomes, support watershed health outcomes, water security or water adequacy as some know it, protecting water supplies, improve water efficiency and conservation, protecting water to promote a viable agricultural economy, growing water smart, public education and resource clearinghouse, and then address water quality and water efficiency in disproportionately impacted communities. So I want to kind of give a quick touch on the changes from the last draft. We came back in October for a work session. And since then, really, there hasn't been any major changes. There's been wordsmithing through our stakeholder and through input. We used the word practitioner instead of entity. For example, using the technical expertise from our stakeholders, we really just wordsmithed a few of the strategies and the details within. We added partners. We even removed some language that the stakeholders were like, I don't really like this. So we really listened, but it ultimately ended up being pretty minor changes. And then the last thing I'll note is that on Monday in the morning, we met with the Board of County Commissioners at a work session just to check in with them before coming today. And there weren't really any recommendations that they have. However, there was some talk about which of these 10 strategies they would like to prioritize more than the others. And I don't have an inclusive list. There's kind of caveats to all of them, but any with an asterisk up there are ones that actually were intended to be prioritized over others, kind of mind the year. So if anything, the only changes that we would see through the end are the timeframes associated and prioritizing some and maybe kind of pushing some off for a few years. So today, that's where we're at. We're at the adoption. You'll see, we are going to get this up for adoption. And if adopted on Monday, December 9th, we would go to a land use hearing for approval. For folks online, folks tuning in, if you're watching this after the fact, here's a QR code that leads directly to that website where the Water Master Plan and the appendices are all within. Furthermore, you could browse the website. There's a lot more information on there. There's a link to our previous regional water study, et cetera. So I would just encourage you to visit that website and move around. So with that, it is Larimer County, this isn't just a community development plan. There was work from engineering, from natural resources, from the Office of Emergency Management. And so I don't want to say that planning recommends approval. However, through it all, it's kind of Larimer County recommends approval of this water master plan. And here's the suggested motion up on the screen. With that, I want to just say thank you more than anything for the time, for the feedback you've provided over the last year, for attending resources that we've had, for giving your input, and more than anything, just listening to what we have to say. So with that, I'll open it up to discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Jimenez. Discussion or questions of staff from my fellow commissioners?
So, I'd just like to say thank you, Ms. Ellis. Your whole team on this has been fantastic. I know the first year that I was on the Planning Commission, we didn't have discussions about water. And I'm thankful that Ms. Oxmacher, that you got this into a discussion item as well. Danielle, wonderful work. It's incredible. I think one thing that, for the millions of people who are watching online, how I envision this is just the first step in a long, broader effort about protecting the water that's in Larimer County. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll echo those sentiments and really kind of thank you guys for all the hard work. Obviously, when we see that roadmap, I mean, it's been an extensive journey that you guys have undertaken, and it's clearly water is a very critical and important resource in our community. And I think one of the questions we struggled with was what is the role for the county, and I think through this process, I think you guys have really identified those areas that are appropriate for the county, where the county can play convener or can add horsepower to different efforts. And I'm really impressed kind of with the end work product. And as Commissioner Duffy said, I think it's a good starting point, and I think that there is a lot that was learned through the process and a lot of critical public engagement. And kudos on the effort.
Could you put the slide up again with the 10 priorities on it?
Absolutely. Oops. All right, there we go.
I'll just echo the comments and just being extremely impressed with the county pulling this together and looking through the polished document that you guys have presented. Being someone who's actually read the Colorado Water Plan, I feel like what you guys created is much more digestible by the average citizen. And so I think it'll be a pretty great document to work around. I also want to say I would agree with the commissioners on the priorities that they set there with the asterisks. And partially because knowing some of the partners and practitioners in our county that are already doing some heavy lifting around some of those other categories that are not marked, I think that work is still moving forward. And so by prioritizing what you've selected there makes sense for the county to focus on. So nice work. And Danielle, I'm also very impressed with you. And so I just wanted to say thank you for all your hard work on this. It's been a pleasure to work with you on it.
Let's do a motion.
I believe we need to do public comment first.
Oh yeah.
Please.
All right. Let's do public comment. Okay, so we'll now open the public hearing and take public comment. Anyone in the room or online that would like to comment?
If there are any members of the public online who would like to speak, please use the raise hand function or press star 9 on your phone at this time. There are no hands raised online.
Okay, well now I don't have to feel so bad for preempting that. So, okay, I don't know if there are any other comments from commissioners, or otherwise we can entertain a motion.
I'll move that the Planning Commission adopt the Water Master Plan, file number 24, code 0280 as proposed.
Second.
Motion and a second. Roll call, Ms. Crutchins?
Commissioner Barrick,
Yes.
Weiss,
Yes.
Eggleston,
Yes.
King,
Yes.
Cassidy,
Yes.
Duffy,
Yes.
Chair Rowe.
Yes. Motion passes. Next item on our agenda is reports from staff.
So a quick update, I believe at the work session, we discussed that we would be bringing a minor code amendment before you all to address the state licensing of natural medicine. I just wanted to provide an update that we will be bringing that forward next month. We've received some, other jurisdictions are doing their code updates. We got a hold of Weld County's proposed language update, and we think it's a good strategy. And so we'll be moving in that direction with a code amendment brought before you next month, in addition to the lighting code that was tabled for this evening. My other item was just to ask the chair and the commission if it would be helpful for you all to know the outcomes of the prior meetings' cases at the end of the meeting. So, for example, the cases you considered last month, if you'd like to know what the BCC did, I'm more than happy to provide those updates if it's helpful.
Let's do it.
All right, so you had 3 cases last month. The High Lonesome Cell Tower was approved by the Board of County Commissioners. The LPCO rezoning, which was the sawmill property near LaPorte, that was also approved. And the Old Castle Special Review and Appeal was approved as well.
Great. Yeah. Thank you for all those reports.
You're welcome.
And with that, our meeting is adjourned.